Hair loss and hair thinning. This is the down and dirty on what is going on and what do I see is the most common reason that my patients suddenly have hair loss or suddenly report that they're thinning out, suddenly report that they're shedding everywhere. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Dr. Carrie Jones. I am a women's health and hormone expert. Definitely hit that subscribe button because I know hormones can feel like herding cats and I am here to help. All right, first things first, root problem. What are the common reasons for hair loss? And this is beyond you got a new hair treatment, you're using a new hair product. I'm hoping that you have figured out pretty quickly. If you suddenly are using, heat products all the time, straightening your hair, you switch shampoos and notice that the hair is coming out more, probably the cause. But if you're like, nope, I haven't changed anything in years, if not decades, and suddenly I am shedding a lot or just having hair thinning here at the temples, the back of my head, or just kind of all over, let's get into it. Here are what I see. One, hormone imbalances, which we're going to break down kind of quickly. Two, nutrient deficiencies. This is a big one and sadly not often picked up or tested by conventional medicine, but we're going to talk through that. Three, stress. Stress encourages hair to let go. And four, inflammation and gut health. Because as women get older and their estrogen and progesterone decline, it can negatively impact the gut, your microbiome, which can then lead to kind of chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, you may be young, you may be in your 20s or 30s and notice like, I just already have gut inflammation now. That can also contribute to hair loss and hair thinning. Let's start with number one, the hormone connection to hair loss. With hormones, in particular, we want to look what are called androgens. These are things like testosterone, DHT, dihydrotestosterone. It's the most potent androgen that we have. What it does is it can bind to androgen receptors and then poof, it can cause hair loss or hair thinning. We generally refer to it as androgenic hair loss. For women, it tends to happen at the temples, maybe even at the back of the head. So if you've noticed that you're getting some thinning here, then let's get that tested. Usually you will also notice other symptoms. Cystic acne or more acne than normal, maybe hair growth in places you don't want. This is known as hirsutism, anger, irritation. Maybe you have a history or currently have been diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. These can all encourage hair loss or hair thinning. Something that I see actually commonly as women get older and estrogen declines is there's this imbalance between estrogen, estradiol, the potent one, and testosterone, or DHT, the potent one. When there's an imbalance and testosterone is winning, so to speak, or DHT is winning relative to estrogen, women appear more androgenic to the body. So the estradiol is dropping and testosterone's not dropping as quickly. So the body is getting more stimulation on that androgen receptor and they lose hair. This is commonly why women are prescribed the medication known as spironolactone, or maybe if they're going a more holistic route, they're doing something like saw palmetto or stingy nettle root to help to block this. Now that testosterone DHT is encouraged when you have high levels of insulin. And by high levels, I mean generally above, I'll be honest, it's generally above 6 or 7. Now, the range on a lab will be up to 25. I feel like that's way too wide of a range. Once we get into the double digits, which let's say under 10 is, okay-ish. Above 10, we're really getting into more of a hyperinsulin state, metabolic syndrome type state that can encourage testosterone and DHT. I also see it with inflammation. If you just feel very inflamed and puffy in your body, that can also encourage that transformation of testosterone and DHT at the androgen receptor and can result in hair loss. Now, number two, estrogen. I mentioned estrogen. As estrogen declines, women often notice in their perimenopausal years as estrogen's going up and down, but once they start skipping cycles or they're fully postmenopausal, estrogen plays such a big role on all things skin that it can cause hair loss or hair thinning. Generally, it's like that all over shedding, kind of like, the family dog just sort of sheds everywhere. Women with low estrogen tend to notice these changes. Estrogen plays a role at the hair follicle, and so declining estrogen, declining hair. That leads me to stress, the other hormone, cortisol, and epinephrine, known as adrenaline. When we are in a stress state, especially a chronic stress state for a while, then the body has to redirect resources. And sadly, growing hair is not considered a resource to keep and hold on to. So we get pushed into the resting phase of hair and then the fallout phase. We're not exactly in the active growth phase. So if you had big stress 3 to 4 months ago, maybe you were going through a major illness, maybe you were going through a major move, maybe through a job change, maybe through a divorce, maybe through a relationship change, maybe your children were really sick. It's just like, oh, a whole month or months of, just big time stress. And then a couple months later, you're like, oh my gosh, I am really shedding. It's this, you just move cycles. Now, with stress support, then we can get you back into the growth phase. The hair loss stage isn't forever. We eventually have to move back into the growth phase, but it just feels slow as molasses. So if you can identify like, gosh, yes, chronic stress has been unbearable the last couple of months, that is probably really contributing to it. And then lastly, when it comes to hormones, thyroid hormone. And here's the thing about thyroid hormone. I feel that thyroid isn't properly tested. A lot of practitioners just run a TSH, a thyroid stimulating hormone. I am a big proponent of running a full thyroid panel. This includes your free T4 and free T3 and thyroid antibodies, especially if you have a family history of autoimmune thyroid or you have autoimmune thyroid. Maybe you already have other autoimmune. I want to make sure we're checking your full thyroid to see what's going on. In particular, if the T3 part is low, that's where I start to see hair loss. And it's generally all over shedding hair. It is a keynote symptom for low thyroid, along with other symptoms such as dry skin, constipation, weight gain, feeling cold all the time, cold hands and feet, feeling tired all the time. These can all go with hypothyroidism. If it's the opposite, though, if T3 and T4 are elevated, you're in a hyperthyroid state, I also see hair loss with that. So I want to check that thyroid and see what's going on. Okay, next category, we have the nutrient category as it relates to hair loss. Well, it turns out the growing of hair does require important nutrients, protein being a big one. So if you are not eating enough protein, which I fully realize can sometimes feel like a full-time job, now that all over social media, everybody's talking about women need to eat protein and just a little bit of chicken on a salad and some yogurt is not enough protein. We need a lot more than that. You're probably looking at 30 to 40 grams per meal to get you enough protein. That protein is a key part of hair growth. Now, other nutrients are important. Iron. Iron is a big one. When iron is low, then we can have hair loss. So if you are anemic, borderline anemic, have been told your iron is kind of low, that can contribute to hair loss. So let's get that iron. There are iron panels that are relatively affordable, usually covered by insurance. Let's see if we can get you an iron panel and see what's going on there, especially if you have a history of low iron, if you're not eating a lot of iron-rich foods, if you have a lot of digestive issues, maybe you're not absorbing your iron, or if you have really heavy periods, you're bleeding out all your iron, then we want to get right on top of that iron. Next, omega-3s, omega-3 fatty acids have been shown to, one, reduce inflammation, but also can contribute and improve hair growth. So if you are eating the organic, fresh caught fatty fish like salmon, or cod liver oil, or just getting like a good quality omega-3, then that could be really helpful for hair growth. Now, there are other markers as well, your B vitamins, your biotin, zinc, real vitamin A, collagen, selenium, which is good for your thyroid. These are all nutrients that, again, if you're not eating them, if you have a lot of GI issues, so you're not absorbing them, maybe you just found out you can't eat gluten. You've been eating gluten for a long while, and I actually just met somebody who was just diagnosed as a full-grown adult in their late 40s with celiac disease. They've gone their whole life eating gluten, had no idea this is the reason for all their GI symptoms. And of course, I said, how did you figure it out? They said, I got all this blood work done and all my nutrients were low. So my doctor said, I think you're not absorbing them. Turns out they had celiac and can't eat gluten. So we know with time, cross fingers, once in that particular case going off gluten, then they'd be able to absorb again and their hair will probably grow better. But if you are also experiencing a lot of like IBS, you just have a lot of GI stuff, maybe you're not absorbing these nutrients very well, and that could be helpful. Next category we get into is stress. I mentioned stress. I mentioned when you have months of stress, big time stress, the chronic stress that the body prioritizes That, handling that as opposed to growing hair. I call it redirecting resources. Sadly, growing hair is not considered important. Your heart is important, your brain is important, your skeletal muscle is important. Hair growth is not important. We feel like it's important, the body does not. I would like to argue with my body. I feel like hair helps um mood. If you're not losing hair and you're proud of your hair, then it really helps your mood. And I feel like hair also maybe keeps you warm. So I have some arguments as to why I feel like we should reprioritize hair, but sadly, it doesn't. So if you're really stressed out, or even I've seen it if people have chronic insomnia, chronic insomnia can be really unfortunately harmful on the body. It can take a toll on all aspects, and that can lead the body to go from growth mode to resting mode to fallout mode. And all of a sudden they're noticing a couple months after this stress, or just in general since stress has started, that their hair is starting to shed a lot more. Now, it is usually a couple month delay. So let's pretend that you are listening to this in March and you notice that your hair loss is starting to happen in May or June, then we track back. If you start having hair loss in June, don't think, oh my gosh, it must have been stress of this month. It's likely rolling and it happened a couple months ago because it takes some time to move from growth phase to resting phase to fallout phase. Now, multiple of these things can overlap. You could have a thyroid problem. You could have had stress a couple months ago. You could also be anemic, God forbid. And so a lot of these factors can sort of overlay. That leads us to the next category, gut health and inflammation. When the gut ain't happy, first of all, you're not going to absorb these nutrients very well, but you're also going to have this low-grade inflammation coming out of the GI tract, which again is going to be stress on the body and it's going to push your hair growth into resting phase and then fallout phase. I see this time and time again. I mentioned the person I recently met who discovered they had celiac disease, but hair loss was the big reason that they'd gone to see their doctor. I don't understand why I'm having all this hair loss and fatigue. Did a bunch of nutrient workup and found out that they had celiac and they weren't actually absorbing nutrients because of the celiac, and therefore they weren't providing the body with the nutrients to grow hair. Plus, if you have celiac disease, and you're eating gluten, that's pretty stressful on the body. But again, if you have a lot of GI issues, if you've traveled out of the country and maybe got some sort of stomach thing and you get back and you think you've kind of recovered, but not really, if you have your whole life have had IBS, if you have been diagnosed with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, if you know that there are certain foods that set you off, but you just can't quite give them up. Maybe you love dairy so much, you love ice cream, you love yogurt, you love cheese, and you're just not quite ready to give them up. But every time you eat them, it really upsets your stomach. It maybe brings on heartburn. It maybe brings on gas. It makes you feel bloated, but you just can't quite give them up. Remember, that's low-grade inflammation, sometimes high-grade inflammation, every single time. On top of this, when estrogen and progesterone decline as women move through perimenopause into postmenopause, research is showing us that estrogen and progesterone do play a big role in the health of our gut and the wall of our gut and keeping things inside and moving out that need to stay inside. If they move out into the bloodstream when they shouldn't be there, then the immune system gets involved, it gets mad, and inflammation ensues. Think of it like little mini fires all the time throughout the body because of the GI tract. Again, if the gut ain't happy, then the body's going to feel stressed and it's going to push our hair into fallout phase. Now, lastly, hair growth hacks. What can you do? What's going to be helpful for all of this? Well, I just gave you all the categories. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research. Look at your lab work. Do you fall into, the upper or lower end of a range? So for example, let's say you get your vitamin B12 checked and the vitamin B12 check range goes up to like 600, but your level is 123, like really way down there. You probably need more vitamin B12. Or let's say you run one of the iron markers known as ferritin, and the ferritin range is like, oh, you can go up to 100, but you're way down at 6. Like, woof. That means we've got some problems going on. Same for vitamin D. Your vitamin D maybe is in the teens, when really it should be up like 30, 40, 50, up in there when you do a vitamin D check. So just because you're in the range, really evaluate, am I solidly in the range or am I at the way upper end or the way lower end? Same goes for blood sugar. Anything over 126, when you get your fasting blood work done, is considered a diabetic range. If you're 124, 125, 120, anything between 100 and 125 is considered pre-diabetic, and blood sugar does play a role in hair growth. So if your blood sugar is too high or it's sort of swinging all over the place, then when you get your blood drawn, if your doctor says, well, you're not diabetic, but you are 120, then no, we need to do some heavy work on the blood sugar. So let's get some lab work on all the pillars that I mentioned and see where you are. Is it a thyroid issue? Is it cortisol? Is it your hormones, right? Is it nutrient deficiency? Maybe you are one of those people that needs to avoid some foods that are really you're allergic to. Maybe we need to get some additional testing done. Now, I did mention about products and things you're doing on your scalp, which you're already evaluating, but it is important you have a clean scalp. If we were to look under a microscope at your scalp, at your hair follicles, are they really clean? Do you do a really good job of scrubbing your hair follicles clean? Or do you only wash your hair about once a week, but you apply product every single day, whether it's dry shampoo and thickener and hair, like hairspray. And so only once a week you're allowing all this buildup, and then you're trying to scrub it clean, but like life is short and time is short and you've got a lot going on. You don't really have a lot of time. So you're doing your quick shower and then you let it go again a week and you're just piling back up the product. So we want to make sure that you do a really good job of scrubbing your scalp, getting all of that off. You may have to shampoo twice, 3 times. You may really need to get in there with some sort of scrubby brush with your own fingernails. You may need to talk to your hairdresser about this. Like, what does the scalp look like? How gross is it? When you get up in a mirror, can you tell that your hair follicles have a lot of buildup around them? That's going to be heavy on the hair follicle and can encourage that follicle to release the hair, and now we have hair thinning. Now, this gets into scalp massage. Blood flow is critical for the hair follicle. So again, when anything you're doing for the scalp, you've seen those red light caps or red light therapy. It is to help reduce inflammation and improve blood flow. But so does scalp massage, whether it's your fingers, whether it's some sort of device, whether it's your brush. Now, you do want to be gentle. I don't want to encourage more hair loss by ripping through your hair with some sort of massage, scalp massage thing or brush, but gentle, and really just try to get blood flow moving to your head, especially if you've got a long history of buildup, clogging it all up, so that blood flow will bring in that nutrient, bring in that hormone to help with hair growth. Now, we can get next level, right? I mentioned red light therapy already, which is something that you may have to buy on top of. So there's red light caps, red light, devices that could be helpful, that sit right on top of your head and help reduce inflammation. So your practitioner may suggest to you, like, you know what? The red light therapy, you got a lot of inflammation at your scalp follicle. Let's do red light therapy. And that has been shown to be quite helpful. You may have also heard of like our low-level laser therapy. Low-level laser therapy may also be suggested to you by your doctor, by your dermatologist, to also be helpful. And that is another great option as you've like gone through all of this. Another one that I know people do are microneedling, which I know sounds scary. I know sounds scary, but if you've ever had microneedling done on your face to help improve circulation, to help bring nutrients to the surface, because then they apply serums and stuff on top, you can do microneedling through your scalp and also apply hair growth support peptides, hair oils that are really supportive. So in hair clinics, sometimes in dermatology clinics, they will have these as services that would be helpful for hair. So whether it's low-level laser therapy, red light therapy, microneedling, these are all options that have been shown in the research for some people to be really quite helpful. And then, of course, there's the topical. Now, there are things like minoxidil. There are, medications that you can apply to help with hair growth. But let's say you've tried that before, or you've had some side effects and you're like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready for that. Or I didn't like the side effects I had from them. There are some more natural. So for example, castor oil, in my own personal experience, a little bit of castor oil in the areas of hair loss. Once you've done the scalp scrubbing, once you've done some circulation support, maybe once you've done some red light therapy, right? Like once you've got the scalp nice and clean and ready to receive, adding in a little bit of castor oil, either into your shampoo, your conditioner, as a part of a hair mask. I personally, anecdotally, have seen it be helpful for improving hair growth again, because I feel and have seen it lower inflammation. And you can also spot treat. You can, like, if you're experiencing loss at the temples here, a little bit of castor oil rubbed in the temples and allowed to sit I find can be really helpful. Now, you do be careful. Castor oil is an oil, so it should be in a glass bottle. It should be organic. It should be hexane free, right? We don't want to put an oil in a plastic bottle. Now we've just pulled all the junk out of the plastic. We don't want to do that because fat oil can do that. And we don't want hexane. So we want hexane free. We want organic, cold pressed, right? So think of your castor oil. We want it as healthy as possible because we're trying to encourage hair growth, not more hair loss. The other thing we often see a lot is rosemary oil. So I absolutely have a lot of patients that will mix a little castor oil with a little rosemary oil, and then they will apply it in their head or use it as a scalp mask after they've scrubbed and tried to improve circulation, doing that 1, 2, 3 times a week and have had really pretty amazing results. So if you're trying to maybe avoid the pharmaceutical like minoxidil for whatever reason, then this is potentially also an option. Now, I will warn you, castor oil is thick. It's oil. So it is hard to wash out. You will have to shampoo your hair a couple of times to get it out, depending on how much you use. And if you put it in your hair and then maybe lay on your pillow, it will get all over your pillow. I mean, it's definitely thick and goopy and it stains, so lay a towel down first. So it can have amazing results, but it is high maintenance. It is a high maintenance oil just because it's thick and it's goopy and it takes a minute to like really get out of your hair. It may take a couple washes. So these are all things to consider with hair loss. I know how common hair loss is, how devastating hair loss can be. So just remember, get those hormones evaluated, look at all the nutrients, look at stress, look at your gut, and then some of these hair growth hacks may be really beneficial. Again, my name is Dr. Carrie Jones. I know hormones can feel like herding cats, and I am here to help.